Welcome back to the People Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton. Today I have Will Beaton from MyTutor. Welcome, Will.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being on the show, and you are our first international guest. Congratulations.
Oh, how exciting. That's great.
Yeah, so tell me what you do at MyTutor and what you enjoy about it.
Sure. So I'm head of people at MyTutor. MyTutor is an online tutoring marketplace that provides access to high quality learning that's stress-free for those who can afford it and funded directly through schools and the government for those who can't. And in the people team at MyTutor, that incorporates both people and talent. So we're looking at the entire employee lifecycle there. So everything from employer brand and recruitment through onboarding, employee experience, performance enablement, and right through to exit.
Oh, it's wonderful. And where's the home base for MyTutor?
So we're currently Officeless. And we're on the hunt for one at the moment, but we're mainly a London-centric organization with about 60% of the workforce based in London, with the rest sort of scattered around the UK, but UK-centric.
That's really cool. How has the Officeless life been for you? I know you said you're looking for one.
Yes. So we've been using co-working space solutions through a company called Dasana, which is a good stopgap while we try and learn a little bit more about what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. But the sense around the office is that people miss the opportunity to have sort of a HQ where you can go, work closely with colleagues, learn from each other, and generally soak up the culture. So very, very keen to get a new HQ in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and you were kind of on the ground floor with MyTutor, right? When it kicked off. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, sure. So when we started at MyTutor, there's about 5-7 of us, something like that, in that sort of like early founding team. And it was quite slower growth at first. So maybe over the first 3.5 years, we kind of slowly grew from the team that I mentioned through to maybe 35, 40 people. And, those early days, very hectic, no processes in place. Everyone's a generalist, focusing on lots of different areas. So it's been a big change and, lots of exciting challenges, kind of taking that early culture, scrappy culture, and trying to build it into a larger scale. We're now about 270 plus people, a larger scale organization, potentially looking at like things like international expansion as well. So potentially taking it even further. So it's been a big change.
Yeah. And you said 3 years has been that time around then?
So I've been at MyTutor about 5.5 years.
Okay.
And the first 3 and a bit years were a slower growth. So it kind of took us from the sort of 5-6 people through to maybe 40 so people. And then over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, we've gone from, less than 50 to over 250, approaching 300.
Yeah. And how has your role evolved and grown since day one?
So I am not a people background professional. MyTutor was essentially my first job straight out of school. And I was initially focused on operations, both sort of customer facing pieces, but also some internal ops, getting stuck into kind of contracts and safeguarding that comes with being an education business. Managed to sort of work up as we grew into a senior position. And then I've moved around different departments. So moving from our B2B side of the business, working with schools, to then the B2C, working with customers. So an operations role. I've worked on commercial aspects in account management, looking at existing business. Now in the people role, as I mentioned, focusing on the employee lifecycle, and actually recently picked up interim chief of staff duties as well. So never a dull day, constantly changing.
Absolutely. And what was your background before going into MyTutor?
So I studied maths and economics at university, and then left and joined MyTutor. But my family are all sort of education centric, teachers, professors. So I've always had an eye on it. So I was keen to get stuck in that sector. So I feel
Yeah. So you're kind of already in that world. So it's just kind of a natural progression.
exactly. I think I always joke with one of our founders, the only reason they hired me is because my dad's a teacher and he had a black book full of all the different contacts at schools that we could get in touch with. So I think that's
That's
maybe
good.
why he said yes in the first place.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating. People who start off, either studying something or switching careers. I always find that they can bring aspects of what they studied or what they did in the past into what they're doing now. So, can you apply any of what you studied to what you're doing now?
That's a good question. It feels so long ago since I studied. But if I think about career-wise, having sort of got my groundings in operations, more like customer-facing operations, and thinking about how that scaled, I definitely think kind of my sort of process-driven approach has definitely worked well when looking at the people aspect of the business, going from small scale, very process light to, well, how do we processize this? What's an efficient way to do it? What's an effective way to do it? What needs to be centralized? What can be decentralized? And sort of asking those sorts of questions to get us to that sort of 270 plus that we're at now. So I think that's definitely been an important one. I actually did also go back to do some studying about people in HR because I think there are some aspects that, things like employment law, you just do need to kind of get your head in the book, I think, to understand.
Absolutely. And I also want to get into like the meat of the conversation, which is growth and making sure your people are taken care of, especially during high growth times, which you're currently in right now, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I think last year was probably our highest growth period. Going at the last 18 months going from that sort of 50 to over 250, 270. And we're now looking to probably add another sort of 30, 40 people this year. So compared to last time, it feels a little bit slower, a bit more breathing room, but very much still growing. And it's definitely been a big focus for us, particularly as well, because it's all been remote. So some of the
Mm-hmm.
things you might take for granted, onboarding, getting people up to speed on kind of what you want, what the culture is or what you think it should be. Some of those things aren't as hard and you have to be more explicit about sharing them and making sure people are onboarded.
Yeah. So what was top of mind for you? When you started getting into that high growth, what were some non-negotiables for the people that make up MyTutor?
So I think the things we had to be wary of was prior to sort of high growth, a lot of the hiring was done directly by hiring managers because, people could just sort of look for one hire a quarter, maybe even less than that. You could give it your full attention and you'd be like bringing people in to that team. So they'd be very closely watched on, are they hitting the standards that we'd expect in MyTutor? As you kind of go through high growth, you might look at different solutions like external agency to support more, or you might bring in a talent function in-house. We did a combination of the both. So suddenly whereas maybe like the CEO might see every candidate before they come in the door, it's sort of layers removed from what it used to be. And you've got external people or new joiners hiring people into the business. Hiring managers maybe only see them at the last round of interviews rather than being in every stage for senior people. So I think really kind of getting down exactly what we were looking for from a hiring process, how we're testing, what the standards are. I think that was really, really important to give us the comfort that we were still going to be bringing people in that would kind of improve the business and not sort of, erode away at that culture that we built. I think that was really important. The second piece was, again, it's around similar part of the cycle, but the onboarding phase. So for us, we kind of class that from the moment they sign a contract to say, yes, I want to join MyTutor, to about 3 months in, which is for us like when they pass probation. And because I think, you can do a lot of heavy lifting in that phase of someone's sort of journey. That's where you like help them understand what the culture is, how things work around here, the way we behave with each other, where we've come from and where we want to get to, what's the mission. And I think really put a lot of effort into that first sort of 3 months of someone's journey, collecting lots of feedback along the way to see what we can improve, trying to make it more scalable, making sure that these cultural pieces that you might naturally pick up around an office in a remote world are being kind of fed at them directly so they can pick it all up still.
Yeah, and when you're going, I mean, I've been in quite a few startups myself, and that growth period, I mean, it's so difficult to scale and, keep an eye on the people who helped you get there at the same time. So, as you mentioned, where like you have an all hands situation or, like a lot of things moving at once, how do you make sure the people don't, get missed during all that activity?
Yeah, it's super hard. And I think, I feel quite lucky with the team that we're in. A lot of the founding team members, so those people I mentioned, the kind of the 6 or 7 early starters, they're still in the business. And they've sort of managed to progress to either senior roles in the field they've always been working in, or maybe move around the business a little bit like myself. So I do think we're quite lucky in the sense that those people who helped define the culture are still here to help shape it, to help kind of take it forward still. So that's been, that's good for us. And I guess, like you said, how do you make sure you're able to keep those people in the business? And I think naturally you are going to lose some. You start off earlier and you set up a business, you're looking for generalists, people who can wear lots of different hats, spin lots of plates, keep things going. And not everyone wants to go from small startup into scale up where maybe you have to specialize more. Maybe you're more focused on people management than you've ever been in the past. So I think it's kind of one, being aware that it isn't always the right for everyone to carry on. But for those who do, just making sure there's like a clear pathway for everyone. So we talk about pathways at MyTutor, whether that's people leaders, individual contributors, or rock climbers, who are the people a little bit like me who kind of move across the business. Maybe you go sideways before going up. Yeah,
I love that term.
You have to do it down. Yeah, it's a fun one. And I think it works quite well for a business of our size. People aren't always just going to progress linearly up. You might change teams. You might even go down to then climb up a level later on. So I think this kind of, labeling, making it possible for people to move in different ways, because if you want to keep good people, there needs to be different pathways available. I think that's been really important. And like myself, I've moved around. There's other people in business who have moved in like chief of staff opportunities, like moving into there. There's other people in business looking at that. So having the pathways has been important. And then you sort of touched on the all hands. So yeah, I mean, and I think back, it's kind of almost funny the way they think we used to run meetings. Like every week we'd have everyone together, and there'd be these big like long meetings, and suddenly you've got 270 people, and it's like, is all this information relevant? How much information can someone take in when they're not involved in it day to day? So we did have to really think about, okay, what do we want to talk about annually? What do we want to talk about quarterly? What do we need to talk about monthly? And who needs to be talking about what, anything less than that? So being more deliberate with sort of business unit meetings, team level meetings, and trying to add a bit more structure to the way people meet, what they're discussing, and how frequent has been really important to make sure everyone's got the right level of information at the right time to be able to operate in their role. We've had to be deliberate and also move some things away from meetings into sort of async updates, like newsletters, for example, recordings, what information is accessible and when.
Yeah. What stuck out to me is, the fact that there have been quite a few people that have been with the organization for many years. I think you said 7 years, 5 years, right?
Yeah, about 5.5, 6 years.
Yeah. And, I don't know, the generations of the main team, but I feel like we're in a culture right now of job hopping. And when you mentioned rock climbing, that term, I feel like you replicate, the benefits of, job hopping and new experience, new skills. Would you say that, those opportunities to upskill and learn and be in, new situations help with employee retention?
Definitely. I think there's some good articles around it. And I believe it's called like tours of duty, is a term that's sometimes used. And yes, it's that idea that you can help people build a breadth of experience by, taking someone smart who's got good transferable skills, like maybe people management, project management, understands the business, has that really good institutional knowledge they can take and apply to different problems across the business. And that's, I think, definitely been a good draw in keeping people in the business. I guess the other one is, we're lucky in that because we've been growing so much, the problems we've been facing are changing a lot. Because I think where people are like engaged, being challenged in different ways, that keeps them around. So making sure that people's challenges aren't going stale is probably, important. And you can do that by moving across the business or just making sure that they've got the right team beneath them. The challenges they face are changing as they go.
Yeah, because job hopping is hard. You have to figure out what you want to pursue. You have to do the interview. So if there's an opportunity where you get everything that you need, why would you want to leave?
Exactly. And I think as well, when you join a new company, it's a whole new culture. You don't know what it's going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
What do people like with feedback? What's the culture around being able to fail fast and learn? If you're already in a good business and that works, better to try and do those new challenges within a business where there's a good culture to support you.
Yeah. And I want to talk about culture too. So, in those early days, how did you determine that culture and what was that like?
Yeah, it's a funny one in terms of defining a culture, because it just sort of forms over time. You kind of don't realize it, and you sort of
Yeah.
you've hired a bunch of people who I guess have a similar set of values that sort of drive them, and things seem to be working along. But then, as we said, like as you start to hire more, and particularly as like people like the founders and CEO get further from the hiring, you need to codify it so what everyone else knows what they're looking for. So I think we've managed to do a pretty good job at keeping a lot of the cultural elements that were important to MyTutor there. And I think the reason that's worked for us is that because we had initial slow growth. So initially we were only adding people in bit piece. It meant there was always time for hires to bed in. Obviously hires that didn't work out would leave. But we had sort of 3 years, we got people who joined the business into senior positions. They're kind of overseeing the culture. Whereas when you think of some of these companies that sort of overnight kind of are made and become sort of 150, 300, there's no time to really create a culture. So it's sort of, you're kind of hiring people, but you don't even know what you're hiring for or like who you're looking for. So I think we got really lucky in that we had that long run time to get things set up. So we could take the time to define it and get our values and behaviors, hiring processes in place, management competencies, what we want leaders to be like. So I think that was a really important part of how we've been able to scale and maintain that culture.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of your values?
So we're actually looking at our values at the moment.
Oh, great.
So we're doing a bit of a project, hopefully rolling out next month.
Awesome.
But one thing that has stayed consistent is behaviors. So for us, behaviors are what people do day to day. We shout them out. We celebrate when people are proactive. That's one of our behaviors. The actions you can do, and then the values are almost the reasons that we behave in the way we do. So they're the ones we want to add a little bit more depth to and are kind of reviewing, because they hadn't been quite formalized in the same way as behaviors. But yeah, our 4 behaviors that we have and we talk about a lot and shout about and praise, and they feed into hiring and they feed into performance reviews, are proactive, be proactive. I mentioned that one. Act like an owner, be an energy giver, and start with why. And the energy giver one's a nice one, because when we do our intro to culture sessions and I've kind of run through the team, people often think that being an energy giver is kind of like someone who's like cartwheeling and just, shouting the loudest and cheering. And actually, it's not about that. It's like how you can give people energy. And a great example for me is someone runs a really good meeting. So the agenda's set ahead of time. All the pre-reads are given in good time. The people who are there are all relevant, engaged. You keep good minutes, get good actions, good outcomes. That gives me loads of energy. But that doesn't mean you have to be sort of cheerleading on the sideline. That can just be, a well-run meeting. So energy giver is a good one.
Yeah,
and that start with why I think it's important.
I was just going to add on the energy giver. I feel like it can be very quiet too. Like you can go up to a colleague and say, you did a really good job on this piece of work. And that's not, like you said, the cartwheeling.
Exactly. And, asking someone how they are, taking the time as a manager to just understand how someone's feeling. can be great, and have those sorts of conversations can give someone energy or make them feel energized to come to work. So yeah, I like that one. And the other one that I think sticks out is start with why. I think that's been a really important one. Really understanding the needs of the business, and for us, it's often the needs of the customer as well. We try and be quite customer centric in our approach, and the way we structure our business is under end users, so under parents and children, under teachers and pupils, under our tutors who are the supply side. So we do really try and have a customer centric mindset when making decisions.
Yeah, I want to learn a little bit more about the act like a owner pillar, because I know intrapreneur has been a big term within the past few years. People who may not want to go out on their own, but also have that leadership, capability. So how do you apply that act like an owner to the people of MyTutor?
Yeah, I think for us, it's really about there's always lots to do, and we value people who can kind of take the initiative and drive projects through to completion. When people join the company, we're actually looking at our share scheme at the moment, but historically, because we've kind of become too big, we have to move from one scheme to another. But historically, we've always made sure that a new joiner gets some sort of options or equity in the business. So they are an owner, so they do feel part of it. And they are kind of intrinsically tied to the success of the business and want to do right by the customer, value for shareholders, which can be them. So I think it's really about just making sure they feel that deep connection to the mission, which we talk about a lot. I feel lucky that we're such a mission driven company, because it's great to shout about, we want to impact 1 million lives by 2025 is our next kind of long-term goal.
That's awesome.
And impacting a life for us is 6 lessons. So if you can get the pupil to 6 lessons, they can make half a grade's progress more than their like an untutored pupil in the same subject. So that's what we're trying to do, get that 6 lessons, and just to be able to talk about that and make people feel connected. And if we can tie objectives to people up through to that mission. So me doing this many phone calls, I can see how that actually directly means that we're going to get closer to those 1 million lives. That's a really important part of making people feel like an owner, like feeling tied to the mission and the vision.
Mm-hmm. And I mean that also, because every part of what you're doing is people oriented, whether it's the leaders interacting, with the people that make up MyTutor, or the tutors that, are helping, other people. So if you're giving, the tutors energy, that just means great work for, the people on the receiving end.
Absolutely. And that's, we are a technology business, I guess, but we actually often refer to ourselves as like a people business. And the technology is to connect those people. So those connections between the tutors to the pupils is really amazing. And if everyone's ever feeling low, we always recommend going to the reviews page and seeing what parents and pupils are saying about the tutors, because it's a real good boost.
That's wonderful. So you talked about the impact that you want to have. So do you have any metrics for the impact that you've made so far?
Yes. So every year we do an impact report. Fortunately, for the past 2 years, there's been no exams in schools
right.
because of the pandemic. So we've actually been a little bit lighter on the data that we've had.
Yeah.
But prior to that, we'd always work with our customers to get it's a great one, because you can get the grade data. What were they doing before, and what did they get in their final grades? And then we can kind of look at the impact they've made for those who received tutoring in that subject versus those who didn't. So we have really been able to see a really strong impact, and see a grades difference over a course of tuition program, which is kind of half a grade more than their untutored subject. So we have been able to see some big impact, which is fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we are about ready to wrap up, but I want to ask you one last question before we do. So what have you enjoyed about, the past 5.5 years with MyTutor, and how have you grown as a leader?
So I've very much enjoyed my time with MyTutor. I think when I first started out, I probably wasn't a leader, very much an individual contributor, more focused on what I was delivering. So I think even just the fact that I've become something of a leader is great, and that's come a lot from the support the business has given me to take on the opportunity. And I think I'm now more aware of, I probably took for granted the company I joined when I first started. Everyone was great to work with, super smart people, great feedback culture, like open conflict, but then good resolutions. And I sort of just took it for granted. But now as we scaled more, bringing other people in, I'm actually seeing what we're doing internally is quite special in terms of the culture we're building and one to be proud of. So I'm probably more aware of the good work we've done, and I'm more of a champion for it. And I try and kind of shout about it as much as I can to the team, take on their feedback. What can we change? Being aware that, we might need to change further as we scale. So that's one thing. In terms of how I personally changed the most, I think I've become, I've kind of, again, I wasn't a people manager originally, and I actually found it quite difficult. In one of my earlier roles, I was sort of managing people and found it quite hard. But now I actually get loads of energy from it. I'm not quite sure what's changed, but now like working my team is one of my favorite things and gives me the most energy in the day. So I've obviously fallen in love with people management somewhere along the way.
That's awesome. And so for people who want to learn more about MyTutor or want to connect with you, how can they reach out?
So MyTutor, the best thing is just, we have a TV advert. It's the UK, so maybe no one will see it, but mytutor.co.uk. There's lots of information on the website there, lots of videos, who we work with, what we do. In terms of connecting with me, LinkedIn's the best place. So Will Beaton, that's Beaton. Always keen to chat to other like-minded people in the space. And then there's one other thing. I'm in a network called People Stories, which is like a group of, again, sort of like-minded startup, scale-up people leaders who just, it's a great place for sort of sharing information, learning from each other. If someone's having a problem, around disciplinaries, or you want to make a new policy, like we're working on a menopause policy at the moment, and that's a great place to understand like what other people are doing in the space, sharing ideas. So People Stories is another place. If you connect, you'll see me in there, probably asking for help constantly or something like that.
Thank you for sharing that resource. That could be so helpful for our audience. I appreciate that. And thank you for being on the show. This has been great. It's been really cool to see how, you went into the people world, without having that background and just have fallen in love with it. That's so awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed chatting.
Great. Well, again, I'm Lindsay, host of People Analytics. Thank you, Will, for joining. And if you know anyone who is a leader in, the people space and want to be on the show, feel free to reach out to me, Lindsay at staffgeek.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Staff Geek's People Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Patton, and I'm always looking to interview leaders who put people first. If you or someone you know lead with a people-first mindset, please email me at lindsay@staffgeek.com. That's LINDSAY@staffgeek.com. If you want to take things a step deeper and understand your organization's true culture DNA, I encourage you to take Staff Geek's free culture assessment. Just head to staffgeek.com and click the button that says Free Culture Assessment. Thanks again for listening.